Welcome. Today we will talk about how to set up your IDE for developing with the Mission Pinball framework. So we will cover like two things. The first thing is like how do you set up your IDE if you want to extend MPF itself? So like if you want to do like custom code in general, or if you want to like fix bugs if there were any in MPF, or like extend MPF for stuff which we didn't think about yet. So that's the first thing, and the second thing will be like how do you set up your IDE for your configuration, right? So how do you set it up for like syntax highlighting and so on. So now I will show both, and yeah, I will also go into how this works a little bit. So this is basically our agenda. So why do I want an IDE? That's our starter at the beginning. And why do we do this at all? Then like Python development, and then afterwards like game development. So like how to develop your game. That's what's the best IDE setup to support that. And then at the end we will go into the MPF Language Server. That's basically what powers the game development part, which we will look into. And yeah, feel free to ask any questions anytime. So I will try to answer them as good as I can. So let's get started. So why an IDE? So why do you need that? Why do you want that? I'm not sure if all of you are like software developers. So like as a software developer at the beginning, you learn to write code like the hard way in an editor without highlighting and so on, because you have to get basically familiar with the concept of programming. So that's usually enough. But then if you like learn to navigate like large code bases where you didn't do everything yourself, you often need like help like figuring out how stuff is named and so on. And that's where like an IDE is really good at. So it will like autocomplete stuff for you, and it generally will increase your productivity. It will give you hints, will show help for stuff. So like what does this function do? So it will show you the function signature or the doc string. And in general, it improves like the speed of your feedback. So like it is makes your development feedback faster. So right, that's like an important thing. So you want to have feedback as fast as possible. Ideally you change code and you run it inside the IDE. It runs like just your test, and it will tell you it's fine or it's not fine. Or even faster, like you write some code and it analyzes it with red, saying, well, this won't compile, for example. And that's very valuable, because otherwise you would like run your compiler, find out that it's not running and so on. And that this basically improves this feedback cycle. And additionally, it can do like scaffolding stuff. So that means like it can autocomplete stuff, or can create function signatures which are usually boilerplate code. That's also something which is very useful for productivity reasons, right? So create a new class and it just copies the methods and so on. So that's the reason why you want an IDE if you want to be a productive like developer. And if you think of like the software projects, the largest cost in most software projects is the time of developers. So if developers can use their time more efficiently, then you save costs effectively. And that's the reason why you want that. And I mean, for commercial projects, those IDEs are also like not that cheap in a lot of languages, at least. So let's start with the Python part. So for Python development, there are like a few major projects which you can use. That's JetBrains Pycharm. So like in my opinion, that's for Python development is definitely the best IDE. I would go for that. There are like commercial licenses, and there's also a community license, and there's also like even an open source version. So if you do open source development, they will give you like a free license of the commercial product. Otherwise, it's a few bucks, but it's worth it. It's really a great IDE. That's what I will show you in a minute. So it's great. So then there's like the newcomer, that's Visual Studio Code, that's from Microsoft. It's a good IDE, definitely. Gets better over time. Python support is okay. It's not the greatest in the world, however. So like Pycharm is much better for Python in my opinion. And there's Eclipse, has been around for a long time, also supports Python. It's I would say similar to Visual Studio Code. And there are many more. So like yeah, there are like a lot of options. And in general, like Python is a dynamic language, so it's not so like that's computer science stuff, but it means that it's not very clear which type certain variables have and so on. And that cannot be so the IDE cannot be 100% certain for certain stuff, and it has to guess and understand how it might be used, and that's why you sometimes get completions which are not 100% correct and so on. So this is like the kind of stuff which you just have to keep in mind, and that's basically where Visual Studio Code is a little bit worse at guessing than Pycharm. And Pycharm is it's good. I will show you like. So like the first thing you want to do is like you want to check out the code. So you go to GitHub, you say here checkout. So you copy this URL here. You can also use the GitHub CLI, but you do not have to. And then you can use the Git client of your choice. So like so I would go to my source folder where I saw all my source code, and then I usually would run git clone and put this URL here from the GitHub, from the Mission Pinball GitHub, and that would clone the repository. I already did that, so I now got this folder, and that's where the source code lives. Now, if you want to change code, you would typically fork the GitHub repository, which you cannot see now because it's behind the video here. But you would click fork here. So let's do that for a minute. So I will just fork it to my personal account. So basically what I did here is like, now it's like my personal GitHub. And my personal GitHub now has a copy of the Mission Pinball GitHub. And here I can now locally change the code. And that basically gives me like the advantage that this is basically my own copy of the GitHub, of the MPF GitHub. So then you would like copy the URL here instead of the Mission Pinball URL. So basically you have to decide in the beginning. Generally, if you want to develop on MPF, just check out this your copy. So then you would check out the source code this way. And that basically has the advantage that you can run like own branches and push them to GitHub. We will come to that later. So that's just to understand, right? So you copy the stuff from our GitHub. You get your own copy, you work on that copy, and then you make pull requests back to our repository. That's how you change stuff in MPF. If you just want to like use this for auto completion reasons, then just check out the Mission Pinball GitHub, like the original one. So where it's forked from, this one. Makes sense? Hope it makes sense. So next thing you do is you take Pycharm and you open the root folder. So here it's SRC, that's basically my source folder, MPF. So if we look at this, so there's like, I cloned into the SRC folder, and under this folder there's now an MPF folder. If you look into that, that's basically the root of the repository. That's what you see here on GitHub. A common mistake is to use like the MPF folder inside here. So you need to open the root folder. So you need to open the one you checked out. So source, SRC, MPF in this case. That's really important. Otherwise, all the passes will go wrong in your IDE. And that's what I did here also. And now you can look at like the project settings in Pycharm. And there's one thing which you have to set up correctly, and that's the Python interpreter. So now it probably also dropped some frames because it was reloading. Here we go. And now you see that I got like a lot of projects open in this namespace and in my workspace, but you will usually only have this one. And there you have to select the correct Python interpreter. So I got like Python 3, and that's actually, I think it's 3.7, I think. Doesn't say here, but that's my system Python, right? It's important to not run 2.7, right? So you need Python 3, otherwise like it won't understand certain stuff in MPF. That's important. And other than that, that will just work. So you can also like look at the structure, and you might want to exclude certain folders here. But in general, the root folder is your source folder. That should be the default. If you got it set up this way, everything should just work. And now you can, for example, find classes. Key bindings depend on what you set up for key bindings. But for example, I can now go to placeholder manager, or even I think you can even take the initial letters, so PM placeholder manager. For example, that will work, and you can just jump to any classes and so on, and it can do stuff. If you press Control, you can like go to the base class, for example, and it will guide, or it will automatically jump for you to the base class. That's very useful for any debugging. So that's how I set my IDE up for MPF. You can basically also, for example, like multiple folders here. There's, for example, test folder, and with a lot of subfolders. And you can, for example, run like tests in here. So I can now run tests in this class. I want to run them. Run unit test for test ball device. And now the IDE will run all my tests here. And they all passed, luckily, in 2.6 seconds. So basically that's what you can do with the IDE. And that's basically, that's basically my Python setup. If you got questions for that, feel free to ask. It should, it hopefully should just work if you set it up like that. So it's really, really simple in general. So I often say it's simple, but it doesn't mean that it usually works on the first try. But if you set it this way, it should work. So now we got like the second thing. The second thing is like game development. So for game development, there are also like a lot of options. In general, like any IDE which supports YAML highlighting will work. So theoretically, Notepad++ will work. It can do YAML highlighting, but it's like not a very good IDE for game development. It's if you want to do something quickly, then it's okay. But other than that, it's not that great. So there's like Visual Studio Code again. That's my choice personally. I will show you in a minute why. Any JetBrains IDE will work. So like Pycharm will work, or also something like CLion. That's basically the same IDE for C or C#. Then like IntelliJ with the Java version. So if you got any of those, this will work. Even Emacs or Vim will work, depending on what you like more for religious reasons. And basically any IDE supporting language server will perform well. So now the question is, what's a language server? And I know that I've been talking about the MPF Language Server for quite some time, and I guess I confused a lot of people with that. So next I will show you is like what's a language server. So there's like a project from Microsoft, and that's called the language server. And sorry. And what they wanted to solve is the following problem. On the left, you see like a lot of languages, so JavaScript, Python, and the Mission Pinball syntax. That's like the three major languages in the world, and any IDE needs to support them, right? So like that's Atom, I think, that's Project Visual Studio Code, and that's Vim. And now, like previously, or even at the moment, all of those like IDEs, they need to add support for all the languages. And that's, as you can see, like a lot of independent implementations and a lot of repeated work. And that's not what we strive for in engineering. And the language server tries to solve this problem. So the language server is something you implement for your language. And then like any IDE, so like Visual Studio Code or Atom or Vim, they implement just the language server protocol. And via this protocol, they can interface any language which supports the language server. And what we did is like we implemented a language server for the MPF syntax, for MPF config syntax. And yeah, like since like language server has been developed by Microsoft, the best implementation for an IDE with language server is Visual Studio Code. That's also the reason why I'm basically recommending Visual Studio Code. So it also works with all the IntelliJ IDEs, but yeah, there are like a few more rough edges. It supports less nicer highlights and so on. And Visual Studio Code is just really nice here because that's basically the only way they use to support all the languages. Even for Python, they got a language server. For Rust, they got a language server, and so on. And yeah, that's really great for us because it makes it easy for MPF to implement it and have like support in a lot of IDEs. And I guess even most of the IDEs in the future. So now how does the MPF language server work? That's, I'm glad you asked. I prepared a slide for that. And this is how this works in general. So like there's your IDE here, let's say Visual Studio Code, and it starts the language server. So that's basically the MPF language server. I will show you in a minute. And it starts this language server and interfaces via some remote procedure calls with the language server. And what it tells the language server is like, I opened this file, I changed this file, here's the new text. And the user wants highlighting on that element, or give me auto-completion in this line at this cursor position, and so on. That's what it tells like the language server. And they're like, this language is huge and it supports really a lot of stuff. And I didn't implement like everything of it, but like a lot of stuff. Not, yeah. And if you need anything there, we can do a lot more, and this will be probably never finished. But like it's like also like an 80-20 solution, so it can do like most of the stuff because that's like not so much effort, and like the last 10 or 20%, that's usually what's really really a lot of effort. So yeah, like the IDE changes configs, the language server only reads configurations, and if the IDE changes the config, it will tell the language server. And that way it stays in sync, right? It's a little bit magic, but in general it works really well. So this is what I want to show you next. So we got like Visual Studio Code here. So this is like how the IDE works. And first thing you would do is you would check out like the MPF language server. As you probably do not want to extend it, you can just go to Mission Pinball language server and check it out here. So again, copy the URL, go into your source folder, do a git clone. You can also use like your Git client of your choice, or you can download the zip file, but I mean, that's really up to you. You clone this, yeah, the MPF language server, and then you go like into the language server folder, and you install it using pip, or you can also like install it with pip install MPF language server. You should have like MPF installed already. Otherwise, it will like install MPF as a dependency. Yeah, so you need like to install the MPF LS language server, right? And so you can have like there's like a binary. Yeah, if you can autocomplete MPF LS, then it's installed. And that's actually the binary which will be later called by Visual Studio Code. So next thing you do, so you install this either via pip or you download it and check it out, is there's inside this repository, there is a folder VSCode client. And basically the only thing you need is like this MPF LS VSIX file. No idea what this stands for, but something with Visual Studio Code. And that's basically a file which tells Visual Studio how to start the language server and how to, where to find it, basically, like a little bit of configuration, not much. So what you do is like you go into your IDE, like this. Now you can see what I got installed here. I also got a language server installed. And then you go to the 3 dots and say install from VSIX. And now we will find this SSC folder and MPF LS. We can also download it, doesn't really matter. Here's code. You double click like the extension, and that's basically how you install it. I already did that, so then you got this entry here, which is like the help file, which is very helpful. It tells you how to install it, what you already did. And then it has like one setting, which is basically the executable file, which is like MPF LS, which is the default, should just work if you installed it. Usually you do not have to change it. And that's already like how you install it. And after that, it's again important to start Visual Studio Code from the root folder of your machine. It has some logic to find out where the root folder is, but it doesn't always get that right. So ideally, see how this works. So I got my test machine here. I change into the machine. I run code, Visual Studio Code, right? Dot for the current folder. And then it will basically open my machine from the root folder. And now it will like go into the configuration and will, for example, look at the included configs. And it will only consider those, right? So the commented out stuff is ignored at the moment. And now it can do stuff like, for example, I got switches. So for example, I can do autocomplete here. It will tell me what is available here. So I can, for example, use like coil player here, or coils or counters, custom code digital outputs. It will tell me which config elements are possible here, right? If I go into like switches, for example, I mean, that won't tell me, but for like, for example, the first switch, it will tell me which config elements are available here. And I can now say, for example, I don't know, I want to have file log. And now I can press autocomplete, that's control space, for example, in my key binding, but might be different in yours. I can tell it autocomplete, and it knows that this could be either basic, full, or none. It also knows that basic is the default. And I can also go with full, and it will complete that for me. I can also go with basic, and now it will underline it and tell me the value is equal to the default. So I might, if I want, remove this line because it does nothing. And makes sense, right? So it's not like a warning, it's just an info. And there's like a lot more. So if you, for example, put something here which is invalid, and it will tell me, okay, the error is bad, but like it knows that this is not correct, right? So this should not look like that, but now I can fix it again, right? So like that's what it can do. And it also knows, like here, it knows the types. It's an enum with those values. That's a list of strings, right? The list. That's one string, defaults to empty. That's also string, and so on. So that's how this works in general. It can also do stuff like it's called go to definition. So for example, it probably knows that this is a ball device. Yeah, device of type ball device required. And now I can press Control, and it will first show me the definition of my trophy. It's very useful in a lot of cases. And I can even like click it, and it will, okay, it's down there. But as you see, right? I'm here, and it will go there. So it knows where this trophy is defined, and do the same for like I know those do not work currently for some technical reasons, but in general, like it knows a lot of stuff, and if it knows it can also go to definitions. So maybe I have something like displays here. We got like virtual segment display connector, and now I can jump to the display, which is also up there. Okay, same window again. Maybe I can find something where it goes to a different like different file, but otherwise you have to believe me that this works in general. So yeah, for example, here it can tell me that this switch does not exist, for example. Yeah, that's what it can do. So that's like, yeah, that's what this can do usually, right? So it can validate stuff. It will also tell you if this is missing and so on. And yeah, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, like this is, I'm not using those configs at the moment, so they might not work. Yeah, and that's basically how you set up like Visual Studio Code for with the MPF Language Server. You can also do the same with Pycharm. I personally don't do that because when I develop like the MPF Language Server and it runs in the same IDE where I develop it, then like I crash my own IDE, right? And that's kind of annoying. That's why I'm not doing that. But it also works. So here we got plugins, and there's, for example, a language server plugin. Now it has like the language server here. And now I can, for example, define, yeah, I already have this for the YAML files. It runs the MPF language server here. So that's how you enable like the language server for Pycharm. Yeah, Chris, thanks for joining in, and thanks for the great ideas and the questions. So yeah, have a great remaining weekend, and see you soon. And yeah, keep on hacking Pinball. Until then, bye.